After our wedding, my wife refused intimacy with me every night for an entire month. When I finally confronted her about it, she unapologetically stated, "My body, my choice. You have no right." Feeling hurt and rejected, I made the difficult decision to file for divorce. Little did I know that what followed would be quite unexpected. "Hello. We'd appreciate your ongoing support. Thank you so much. Your engagement means a great deal to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, please consider subscribing to this channel. Additionally, we would love to hear from you. Which city are you watching from? You might even receive a shout out in our next story. Today, a special shout out goes to Jennifer King from West Sussex, UK. Thank you for being a loyal viewer. Now let's delve into the details of today's story. Standing at the altar, my palm was sweaty, my heart pounded, and it felt as though it might burst out of my chest. Alina looked stunning in her white dress, her smile radiant, and her gaze locked onto mine as if I were the only person in the world. I had known her for 2 years, and every moment had led us to this point. Our wedding day, my brother Mark, who was my best man, nudged me gently. With a playful grin, "Dan, you're one lucky guy," he whispered, loud enough to elicit chuckles from the front row. Returning the smirk, I felt the truth in his words. The vowels rolled off my tongue effortlessly, each promise of forever sealed with a kiss that carried a hint of hope. Little did I know then what I would discover a month later, a revelation that would make me wish I had walked away right at that moment. The reception passed by in a blur of heartfelt toasts and joyous laughter. Mark took the microphone slightly tipsy and delivered a speech about me being the older brother who had it all. As the crowd erupted in laughter, I clapped him on the back. Elena joined me on the dance floor, her body close to mine, her laughter gentle in my ear. I believed it was the beginning of something genuine. Later that night, we stumbled into our new home, now our shared space. Exhausted yet content, I reached out for her, anticipating the intimacy we had cultivated during our months of dating. But she pulled away abruptly and sharply. "Not tonight, Daniel," she stated firmly. "My body, my choice." I stood there frozen, bewildered but acquiescent. Weddings can be stressful, I reassured myself. She'll come around. Yet she did not. Night after night, the pattern repeated itself. I would lean in, hopeful for a connection, only to be met with her cold resistance. She would repeat the phrase, "Not on me, my body, my choice," with a conviction that seemed etched in stone, avoiding eye contact. Lying there, gazing up at the ceiling, I questioned if I had somehow erred. Was it something I did? Did she already have regrets about our marriage? Despite my attempts to engage her in conversation and offer assistance, she would dismiss my concerns with a brusque "I'm fine," before immersing herself in her phone. The glow from the screen filled the room late into the night as her fingers tapped away messages that she kept hidden from me. When I asked about the person she was communicating with, she always replied hastily and tersely with work, leaving me skeptical yet wanting to trust her. As days turned into weeks, the rift between us widened. She would leave for extended periods, supposedly running errands, only to return empty-handed. A secretive smile would occasionally grace her lips as she glanced at her phone, sharing a warmth that she seemed to reserve solely for it. During meals, her appetite seemed diminished, responding to my queries with curt one-word answers. Tentatively inquiring about her day prompted a brief and vague find in return. I gradually became more aware of subtle cues that I had previously overlooked, a prolonged scrutiny of my inquiries about finances. She would say casually, her curiosity evident with a shrug, I had built that company from scratch, pouring my heart and soul into it. But her interest seemed detached, as if she were merely observing me rather than genuinely caring. To add to my suspicions, Mark was becoming increasingly present in our lives. I had hired him as a project manager at the company a year ago, offering him a good salary. He started showing up unannounced at our home, claiming it was work-related. He would lounge on the couch, casually crack open a beer, and inquire about Elena. "How's the missus treating you?" He would tease, a smirk playing on his lips. I would brush it off, mentioning that she was adjusting. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their interactions. I tried to convince myself that it was just friendly banter between friends and family. But the unease lingered, becoming a persistent ache that I couldn't ignore. As the days passed, my anxiety grew. I would lie in bed at night, watching her engrossed in her phone, the eerie glow of the screen casting shadows across the room. I had stopped reaching out to her, the fear of rejection outweighing any attempts at intimacy. And then, one night, consumed by doubt and unease, I waited until she drifted off to sleep. Her phone was buzzing softly on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. Stooping felt dirty, but the sound wouldn't stop. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I got up, paced the hall, trying to shake the paranoia. She was my wife, and I vowed to trust her. But trust doesn't silence questions. The next night, I heard her voice, low and hushed, coming from the bathroom. I pressed my ear to the door, heart pounding. Heck, clueless, she whispered, just wait. My stomach dropped. Who was she talking to about me? I stepped back, the floor creaking under me. The whispering stopped. She came out a minute later, clutching her phone tightly, her face blank. Who are you talking to? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Work, she said, rushing past me. At midnight, I pressed. She spun on me, my heart dropping. It's Daniel. I couldn't. That was the moment I decided. I wasn't letting this slide. I'd watch her, figure out what she was hiding. I didn't know then how deep the lie went, how it had ripped my life apart. But I knew one thing. The woman I married wasn't who I thought she was. And I was damned. A month into my marriage, I reached a breaking point. Elena's initial coldness had evolved into an impenetrable barrier, and I was exhausted from repeatedly crashing into it. Her once sharp my body, my choice stance had transformed from a minor sting into a significant blow, fueling my suspicion that she was keeping something from me. I noticed her secretive behavior, the sly smirks at her phone, the concealed messages, and the prolonged errands that left me puzzled. Whenever I inquired about her whereabouts, she would offer vague responses before shutting me out completely. I had never been a jealous person, but with doubt gradually creeping in, I knew I had to address the situation. On a quiet Friday evening, with only the hum of the TV as background noise, I mustered the courage to confront Elena. She was engrossed in her phone, furiously texting as if her life depended on it. Taking a deep breath, I spoke up. Elena, we need to have a conversation, I said calmly. She didn't bother to look up. About what? She mumbled, her thumb still in motion. About us. Her distance, the lack of intimacy. What's going on? Finally, she met my gaze, and in her eyes, I detected something. In the flicker of annoyance, maybe guilt. Nothing's going on, she said sharp. I'm just not in the mood. You don't own me, Daniel? The words hit like a brick. I stood there, jaw tight, searching her face for a crack. I'm not trying to own you, I shot back. I'm trying to understand my wife. She rolled her eyes, grabbed her phone, stormed out. The front door slammed. I didn't follow. Work was my escape, but even there, the unease followed me. Our construction company was my pride. 10 years of sweat and late nights built from a single truck to a crew of 20. Mark ran projects for me, and he'd been acting strange lately. He'd swing by my office more than he needed to, leaning on the doorframe with that lazy grin of his. I was married life, big shot. He'd asked, too casual, too often. I'd shrug, say it was fine, but his questions kept drifting to Elena. Is she happy, keeping you on your toes? He'd laugh, but his eyes lingered on my reaction. I started wondering why he cared so much. Then there was the day he asked about money. In the break room, I watched as he stirred sugar into his coffee, mentioning how the business was still doing well. Yeah, steady, I replied, curious about his intentions. He nodded and then asked, have you ever thought about cashing out? You have enough to coast. I furrowed my brow in confusion. Why would I do that? This is my life, I replied firmly. He shrugged and smirked, suggesting that Elena might prefer a more comfortable lifestyle. It was an odd remark that lingered in my mind. I dismissed it as typical behavior from Mark, always wanting what I had, ever since we were kids. I failed to see the underlying implications. Later that night, Elena left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. A text message lit up the screen, tempting my curiosity. I shouldn't have looked, but I couldn't resist. The message was from someone named M with just 2 words. All good. My heart raced, wondering who M could be. Maybe Michelle from her old job or her cousin Maria. But deep down, my intuition pointed towards Mark. I didn't touch the phone or scroll through the messages. I simply stood there, captivated until Elena emerged from the shower, catching me in a moment of uncertainty. What are you up to? Narrowing, she snapped. Nothing, just checking something out, I lied. She didn't believe me, but she didn't press further. That night, I went to bed feeling uneasy. The following day, I found myself checking her phone records, something I had never done before. I felt like a creep, but I needed to confirm my suspicions. Logging into our shared account online, I sifted through the numbers. What I discovered confirmed my fears. Numerous lengthy calls to Mark's cell, mostly at night when I was not around. My hands trembled as I printed out the incriminating list. Despite my urge to confront her immediately, I held back, needing concrete evidence. I began to monitor her every move, tracking her whereabouts and interactions. She seemed oblivious or unconcerned. The tension reached its peak a week later when she said she was meeting a friend for drinks and hurriedly left the house. I waited a few minutes before discreetly following her. Driving cautiously and keeping a safe distance, I trailed her through town. To my dismay, she did not head to a bar as she claimed. Instead, she drove to a secluded park at the city's outskirts. Parking a distance away, I observed her exit the car. And then my worst fears were confirmed when Mark emerged from. His truck pulled up, his hands casually tucked in his pockets, causing my breath to catch. As she approached and they locked lips passionately, it struck me deeply. Their embrace seemed practiced, like a well-rehearsed routine. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turned white. The sight of my wife and brother together sent a shockwave of betrayal through me. I remained frozen, the stark reality dawning on me. This was not a fleeting affair, but a deliberate act of betrayal that cut deep. I drove home with the haunting image of their intimate moment burned into my mind. The memory of her hands on him and his smug expression haunted me. Though their intentions were unclear, one thing was certain: I was no longer oblivious, and they would soon realize they had underestimated me. Witnessing Elena and Mark together shattered something inside me, not my heart or my reserve. I had spent weeks suppressing my suspicions, but that kiss exposed the deceit in glaring clarity. They weren't just cheating, they were playing me for a fool. As I drove home that evening with a steely resolve, I didn't succumb to tears or outbursts. I focused. If they believed I would meekly accept their treachery, they were gravely mistaken. The following morning, I awoke and immediately began investigating. Elena was still asleep as I quietly made my way to my office. I had already obtained the phone records that revealed numerous lengthy conversations between her and Mark. The realization hit me hard that I had been in the adjacent room during these exchanges. I then delved into my bank statements, noticing withdrawals from my account that I had not authorized. Initially small amounts, they gradually increased and were traced to her debit card. She had been discreetly siphoning money, using ambiguous receipts to mask her actions. Furthermore, I stumbled upon old texts, retrieved from our cloud backup, that shed light on a disturbing earlier conversation between Elena and Mark. In one message from him preceding our marriage, she wrote, "He's loaded, hang in there." Another from her read, "I'll take what I can get." It dawned on me that this wasn't a case of a failed romance, but a carefully orchestrated deception. Later that day, I contacted my lawyer, Greg, and explained the affair and the financial deceit to him. I informed him that Elena had unwillingly signed the prenuptial agreement that I had insisted upon. Initially joking about my lack of trust, she had ultimately agreed. Now it seemed my caution had been justified. I went to pursue an annulment, I informed Greg, revealing the depth of the betrayal in the paper trail of deceit. She married me under false pretenses. It's fraud. To my relief, Greg remained composed. "We have a strong case," he assured me. "Please gather all evidence. Texts, photos, anything that proves your claims." As days passed and I gathered bits of information, I took a picture of Elena's phone screen when she left it unlocked. Mark's name was glowing, accompanied by a heart emoji. I hired someone to tail them and obtain pictures of them meeting again. Every piece fell into place like a puzzle, but I regretted ever solving it. Elena became suspicious when I stopped talking and called me staring without saying a word. She started getting nervous and began packing bags for a weekend away, thinking she had time. On the day I filed for divorce, Greg served her the papers at the house while I was not there. I unintentionally witnessed her fake tears. She called me screaming, "We can't do this." I hung up on her. The next day, she countersued for alimony, claiming I had pressured her into marriage and that she deserved a share of my company. Work became a minefield after that. Mark showed up on Monday, acting as if nothing had changed. He entered my office and casually tossed a clipboard on my desk saying, "Got those side updates for you," with a grin on his face. I looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions. My brother, whom I had helped out of trouble numerous times as a child, now seemed like a stranger to me. "You're fired?" I stated flatly, causing a smile to disappear. "What?" he exclaimed, caught off guard. "You've heard me." "Leave," I replied firmly. "Dan, come on, what's going on?" he pleaded. I stood up and approached him, getting close. "I saw you with her." "Pack your things, you're finished," I declared. His face first turned pale, then red. "It's not what you think," he attempted to explain, but I interrupted him. "Save it for someone who cares." He gathered his belongings and left, muttering curses under his breath. The true repercussions occurred at our mother's house that weekend. She had invited me for dinner, claiming it was a time for family to come together. Despite my doubts, I accepted. Upon entering, I was greeted with a shocking scene. Elena and Mark sitting at the table as if I had rudely interrupted their meal. My mother rushed over, her voice shaking as she expressed the need to resolve the situation. "Daniel, we must mend this," she implored. They proceeded to explain everything, claiming it was a mistake that had spiraled out of control. I looked at each of them in turn. Elena avoided my gaze, while Mark smirked as if he found the situation amusing. Stealing from me, betraying my trust with my wife. Is that what you find amusing? Questioned sharply. My mother recoiled at my words. "He's your brother," she muttered. There she pleaded, "Forgive him?" I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "He's not my brother. He's a leech." "And her?" I pointed at Elena. "She's a gold digger who never truly cared for me." Elena stood up defensively, but Mark quickly restrained her. "Dan, let's have a discussion," he said in a forced calm. I advanced towards him, looming over his smaller frame. "You have no say, no claim to anything of mine. Not my money, not my trust, not even my name." I turned to my mother. "You're choosing him over me? Fine, you're out too." She gasped in disbelief as I continued, ignoring her pleas. Walking away, I left their voices fading in the background. The court hearing arrived swiftly. Elena's lawyer spun a tale. A young woman trapped in a marriage with a controlling husband. However, Gray presented evidence, texts, photos, and signed prenuptial agreements. This marriage was a sham, he argued. She targeted him for his wealth. The judge ruled in favor of an annulment, denying alimony or any substantial payout. As Elena glared at me while storming out, Mark followed behind like a defeated figure. I didn't feel victorious just yet. Instead, I felt a sense of emptiness mingled with newfound liberation. That night, I sat alone in my house, reflecting on the events of the day. The house belonged to me once again, enveloped in a deafening silence that I now owned. The victory was mine as they had lost, but the battle was far from over. I was well aware of Elena's cunning nature. She would undoubtedly scheme something new. And Mark, ever the loyal follower, would stand by her side. My triumph in court was satisfying, yet insufficient. Elena and Mark had destroyed my life, and I refused to let them escape without consequence. They had underestimated me before, believing I would surrender and allow them to continue unscathed. After years of painstakingly building my reputation and my business, I would not allow them to tarnish it and walk away unharmed. I was determined to ensure they faced the repercussions, every sharp edge of it. Elena made the first move. A day following the legal action, my phone incessantly buzzed with notifications revealing her exposés on social media for all to see. She portrayed herself as a victim trapped in a loveless marriage, falsely claiming he had stripped her of everything. Tears adorned her profile picture with the hashtag screaming injustice. A flood of comments ensued, with strangers labeling me a heartless creature and old friends questioning the events. I could have chosen to overlook it and let it quietly fade away. However, my attention was captured when I noticed Mark. They lit the fuse, provoking a war, and I decided to give them one. Armed with ammunition in the form of those insulting texts from before the wedding, I retaliated. Mark had labeled me as gullible, referring to me as a cash cow, and ridiculed me in their messages. Without any rants or dramatics, I logged into my account and posted the screenshots with a simple yet powerful caption. "Truth hurts." The tides turned swiftly. Elena's followers retracted, and Mark's friends fell silent. But I didn't stop there. I strategically emailed key individuals, clients, and mutual acquaintances, attaching the same evidence in a composed and professional manner, merely aiming to set the record straight. The word spread like wildfire. Elena's facade as a victim crumbled, and Mark's charming facade faded. In an attempt to strike back, Mark targeted my business. A foreman named Pete called me, informing me that Mark had gone to a job site, bad-mouthing me to the crew, claiming he had been fired for no justifiable reason. Pete mentioned that Mark had tried to sway a few individuals for a different opportunity. I gritted my teeth, expressing my appreciation to Pete for the heads up. Firmly, I reaffirmed the training I had instilled in my team, prepared to face whatever challenges the situation might bring. Deep loyalty was ingrained within me. While Mark's attempts to deceive failed to entice anyone, I wasn't willing to leave everything to chance. Sarah, a reliable office manager who had been by my side for 5 years, possessing a keen mind like a sharp blade and a deep disdain for Mark, offered her assistance. "Let me handle it," she asserted confidently. Without hesitation, she discreetly informed our suppliers of Mark's transgressions. By the end of the week, Mark found himself ostracized by the entire town, effectively becoming toxic in the community. The repercussions extended to our familial dynamics as my mother, in a state of shock, reached out to me a week after the court's decision. I received a text message summoning me to dinner at her place at 6:00 p.m., insisting that we needed to have a conversation. Despite initial reluctance, my curiosity propelled me to attend. Upon arrival, I found myself in an unexpected situation. An ambush orchestrated by Elena and Mark, with my mother playing the role of a hesitant referee. In a gentle tone, my mother encouraged me to take a seat, assuring me that they could resolve the situation. However, I remained standing, questioning their motives. When prompted to move past the events, with Elena and Mark offering weak apologies, I sought support from my mother, only to receive her plea for forgiveness instead. Overwhelmed with a mix of emotions, I struggled to contain my silent fury, fully aware that apologies were insufficient to erase the year of deceit and betrayal. He's not my brother. He's a thief. And as for her, I gestured toward Elena. She's a manipulator who deceived us all. My mom welled up with tears as she said, "You're tearing this family apart." Stepping closer, I spoke in a low voice. "They caused this rift. You're simply taking their side." Mark stood up and said, "Come on, man." I interrupted him. "Don't. You mean nothing to me now." Turning to my mom, I said, "Call me when you realize who your son truly is." I left, tuning out their protests as I walked away. That marked the final time I set foot in her residence. Upon returning home, I assessed the situation. My business remained strong, with loyal clients and consistent profits. Sarah efficiently managed things and even brought me coffee one morning, quietly acknowledging, "You're doing well, boss." I expressed my gratitude, but I knew the conflict was far from over. Elena's online activity had decreased. Mark's job search had halted, yet I anticipated their next move. They would regroup and likely attempt something drastic. I remained vigilant, monitoring my finances daily and tightening the security of my life more than ever before. Then it happened. Late one night, my phone beeped with a message from Elena without a name, only her number. The text simply stated, "You'll regret this." No explanation, no specific threat. In the dark, those 3 words glowed, catching my gaze. My heart beat steadily, filled with the remorse I held. I had placed my full trust in her, hired Mark, believed my mother's lies. But seeking retribution from them, making them face the consequences, that wasn't regret, it was justice. Without responding, I sent the message to Greg, instructing him to keep it stored. Whatever plan she was devising, I would be prepared, as I reclined the silence of the house enveloped me. I had lost a wife, a brother, a mother. Not the people I believed them to be, but mere apparitions in their likeness. It was painful, yet liberating. I was solitary, but I held the reins, a control they would never wrest from me again. Elena's warning, "You'll regret this," lingered over me like a shadow. But fear did not grip me. I had faced their worst experience, Mark's betrayal, and emerged resilient. Whatever challenges she had in reserve, I would confront them head on. After enduring their manipulation for so long, I now dictated the course. Forwarding the message to Greg, I advised him to stay vigilant. "She's desperate," he remarked. "Desperate individuals make mistakes." I nodded in agreement. Sloppy or not, I stood firm, determined to. I refused to be caught off guard by her again. It didn't take long. A week later, Greg called me to inform me that she had filed a motion claiming that I had coerced her into signing the prenup. She said she had proof. I let out a dry, short laugh. Proof of what? Her lies? Greg then faxed me the filing, which included photos that had been edited to make it appear as if I were yelling and grabbing her arm. They were clearly fake, but potentially convincing to someone who didn't know better. These photos were accompanied by an affidavit in which she swore I had threatened her into signing. My anger surged, but I managed to stay composed as I asked Greg if we could fight this. Without hesitation, he assured me that we would bury it. The hearing was scheduled quickly, with Elena pushing for a speedy victory, perhaps in the hopes that I would settle. I entered the courthouse with Greg by my side and spotted her across the room. She was dressed modestly, her eyes red as if she had been crying. Mark was nowhere to be seen. It seemed he had deserted her too. Her lawyer approached us confidently, presenting the edited photos and her tale of woe. "Mr. Carter intimidated my client," he claimed. "She feared for her safety." The judge, stern woman with sharp eyes, listened attentively. Gray reviewed the evidence briefly, displaying a lack of interest. Heading to work, he analyzed the metadata of the photos, which revealed post-alteration timestamps. By presenting the original text, which he referred to him as the cash cow, he exposed her motive. Addressing the judge, Greg asserted that this situation was not coercion, but rather a woman seeking revenge after her failed scam. During my testimony, I kept it concise. She only married me for money and turned against me when I discovered her affair with my brother. The judge swiftly made a decision, denying the motion in just 10 minutes and concluding the case. Elena left the courtroom with a grim expression, while her lawyer muttered apologies. I didn't react, simply walking away, finally free. Later that evening, Mark arrived at my home. Relaxing on the porch with a beer, I watched as his truck pulled up, and he cautiously got out with his hands raised. "Dan, please hear me out," he implored, sounding nervous. Setting down my drink, I stood up and gave him 30 seconds to speak. Mark stumbled over his words, revealing the consequences of his actions: job loss, breakup with Elena, and his mother's distress. Admitting his mistake, he apologized, acknowledging our brotherly bond. Moving closer to him, I locked eyes with him and told him, "The day you chose her over me was the day you ceased to be my brother. You don't get a second chance to betray me." He flinched, attempting to argue, but I cut him off. "Get off my property," I said firmly. With his tail between his legs, he left, and I didn't bother to watch him go. The following day, I received a handwritten letter from Mom, filled with guilt trips across 2 pages. As I read her words, once again siding with him and putting the blame on me, I decided I'd had enough. I lit a match and watched the letter burn in the sink. Families shouldn't betray you and then demand forgiveness as if they are entitled to it. I was done carrying their burden. My work kept me grounded. Sarah, stepping up admirably, ran the office seamlessly and kept the team united. One morning, she brought me coffee and lingered by my desk. "Are you okay?" she asked, showing genuine concern. I nodded, and she replied, "You're getting there." Her smile was small yet warm. "Good, you deserve it," she added. I looked at her, appreciating her steadfastness and intelligence, someone who had stood by me when everything else fell apart. Perhaps it was too soon, or perhaps it was nothing at all. However, when I asked her to grab a drink after work, she agreed. While there wasn't a solution, it was a step in the right direction. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a week later. I drove to the outskirts of town, a familiar spot with a view of the city where I used to sit and reflect. Standing there with hands in my pockets, I took it all in. I had been through a lot, from Elena's insincere affection to Mark's betrayal, and even my mom's misguided beliefs. It had been painful, leaving me feeling hollow for some time. However, I fought back and reclaimed my strength. My business was thriving, and my life was now truly mine with no lingering attachments. As I recalled Elena's final message, her taunts, and her empty threats, I didn't feel any regret. I had been too trusting in the past, but I took the lesson to heart, sharpened my instincts, and let go of any unnecessary baggage. They had hoped to break me, but I placed my faith in myself and emerged victorious. The sun began to set, and I realized I had been holding my breath. I was no longer the same man I was a year ago. Naive, optimistic, and easily fooled. I had toughened up, gained clarity, and at that moment I felt solid and whole again. Looking back at my truck, I was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had underestimated me, but I had not given up. I triumphed. That was the end of it. If you felt Daniel's spite in your bones, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven Mark or cut him off too? Subscribe now and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. What's your take? Drop it below and let's talk. See you in the next story.